Before Chuck Norris, Jet Li, and Jackie Chan, there was John Keane, aka Count Dante, one of the first martial arts celebrities and the archetypal fake martial arts guru. Count Dante capitalized on a time when Asian martial arts had a foreign and exotic mystique in America. Before kung fu flicks and local dojos embedded it into American culture, people thought karate was just guys splitting bricks and doing choreographed moves. It didn't have any appeal as far as self-defense or competition went. Through his pamphlet advertised in Marvel comic books, Count Dante made a small fortune and became a local celebrity in Chicago, the US, and even as far as Europe. Though footage of Dante is elusive and hard to find, his legacy lives through the fictional characters he allegedly inspired, like Sensei Kreese from The Karate Kid, Mr. Satan from Dragon Ball, and Zohan from Don't Mess with the Zohan. Through the 20th century, Asian martial arts slowly made their way from Asia to Hawaii and then to the American West Coast. They started to become popular in the early 60s, a time when America was still racially and culturally divided. Over in Los Angeles in 1961, Master Ark Wong became one of the first teachers of the martial arts to break the long-standing Kung Fu color line, which barred the teaching of China's sacred fighting arts to anyone that wasn't Chinese. The same year, a young Bruce Lee started doing the same at his Oakland studio, teaching his self-formed Jeet Kune Do. At the time, all of the few karate schools used to be Asia-run too, but soon, white-owned karate schools would start to pop up with signs and ads to the Japanese fighting art displayed in storefronts. Martial arts were popularized by ex-soldiers from the Pacific, so in the early 60s, dojos looked nothing like they do today. Most students were cops, ex-soldiers, and blue-collar tough guy types. Robert Trias was one of these students, an ex-colonel who fell in love with karate in the Pacific during World War II. Just a year after the war, Trias was credited with opening America's first karate school in 1946, and he wrote The Hand is My Sword in 1956, the first martial arts book published in the US. John Keane was born in 1939 into a well-to-do Irish family in Southside Chicago's Beverly neighborhood. He was a skinny kid, and after confronting some home invaders and getting beaten up during a home invasion, his dad signed him up for boxing classes with Johnny Colon, an Irish-American boxer who ran a gym in Chicago's Woodlawn neighborhood. John would be around a lot of minorities at the gym, and he grew popular with black folks on the South Side. After high school, he joined the Army, where he learned hand-to-hand combat and various martial arts. Though he loved the combat training, John seemed hell-bent on getting discharged from the Army to avoid going to Vietnam. He stole cars, made false reports to police, and even went AWOL for a while. In 1960, John finally got kicked out of the Army. Free to pursue his passion, John went back to Chicago and devoted himself to martial arts full-time. He trained under Johnny Osako in the Chicago Judo Club, and during this time, he also discovered Robert Trias and his dojo in Phoenix. John was so obsessed that he made several road trips to Phoenix to train. He slept on dojo floors and in cheap motels. In a few years, John was a karate prodigy and could split a brick in half with a kick or a punch. He became a second-degree karate black belt and then sought to become a sensei himself. He even began teaching his own rendition of Japanese karate to Chicago kids. John's first gym was on the South Side, and the second in the Gold District on Rush Street, the heart of Chicago's nightlife scene. A big deal for someone his age. Rush Street had burlesque clubs, a Playboy club, and Mr. Kelly's Club, a popular celebrity hangout spot. He'd even train with club bouncers, meaning he could get in almost anywhere. John would get celebrity clients from these places too. The early success would be addictive, and John started living lavish. By now, he needed multiple hustles to maintain his flashy lifestyle. At the time, Chicago was the martial arts capital of the US, and uniquely, John was going against the grain by teaching black people martial arts. Chicago was a hub of black power activity at the time. and teaching black people to fight was frowned upon, especially by local cops. And what's more, John's students were winning everything. Raymond Cooper, one of John's students, was the reigning national karate champion at the time, and two of John's students even took a picture with Bruce Lee. John King was admired by local black kids. He even made friends with Jim Jones, a popular black karate gym leader. In no time, he was the go-to guy for black guys looking to learn karate. Though, some saw this as self-serving and only for the purpose of selling memberships in John's dojos. Membership at one of John's dojos was $20 a month, a hefty price at the time. In '63 and '64, John and Trias held successful karate tournaments in Chicago. They attracted martial arts prodigies like Ed Parker, Jun Rhee, and Bruce Lee. With the success of the tournaments, John showed that he was clearly a talented promoter and a genius marketer. For Robert Trias, these tournaments were for the good of the sport. But for John, they were a way to get his clout up. He enjoyed the attention. By 1964, he was the head of the U.S. Karate Association. John was even lauded as being one of the top karate instructors in the United States by America's premier martial arts magazine, Black Belt. But under the surface, over the years, John had grown disillusioned with traditional karate and wanted to morph it into something more street effective. Rather than going for knockouts like in boxing, a fighter in karate matches typically pulls their punches and kicks. Judges award points based on their technique, and fighters can lose points or even be disqualified for making contact. And remember, John had a boxing background where knockouts were both legal and common. So karate's no or little contact rules frustrated him. He understood that violence sold tickets and wanted karate to be a blood sport. Towards the end of 1964, a rift grew between John and Trias, and John was fired from the USKA completely. John claimed that when Trias came to Chicago, he found that John had given some black students black belts, and Trias didn't like it. John added that the only black students in the USKA were his as well. In response, Trias told reporters that 40% of the USKA membership was actually black. He credited the fallout to a control dispute and John undermining the principles of karate by pushing for more violence in the sport. After parting ways with Trias, John, still only 25, founded the World Karate Federation. John would go out of his way to distinguish his WKF schools from the USKA. They would wear red belts and black uniforms. John and his disciples were named the Black Dragons, and they operated as a secret society. He was allegedly abusive to students in his dojos, and they notoriously had the mantra, "There is no pain in this dojo." In his dojos, prospective brown or black belts would be put in a dimly lit room and be forced to fight up to 4 people, one after the other. The initiation rituals involved sticks and knives too, and students were even rewarded with beers and burgers for injuring a mentee. On the streets, John would take it a step further. At local bars, he'd instigate bar fights by slapping a drink out of the scariest guy's hand and blaming it on one of his students. John was all about real-life applications, and this was a way to test his students' hearts. By the end of 1965, many of John's students, even the black ones, abandoned him for more popular and less abusive USKA gyms. On a July night in '65, Dante and a friend, Douglas Dwyer, pulled up to Gene Wycker's school, a dojo John used to teach at. They approached the dojo and stuck a 40-inch dynamite stick and blasting cap to the front window. John had some kind of grudge against the dojo, and this was revenge. After a few tries at lighting the fuse, it wouldn't stay lit, so John lit an entire box of matches, lit the fuse, and they took off. They circled the block and came back to find nothing happened. John stepped out to try again, but a detective's car showed up out of nowhere. They took off and led the cops on a high-speed chase until Doug turned down a dead-end street. They were arrested and John got hit with 2 years of probation, but no jail time. John later played the incident off as a drunk and stupid prank when questioned by a reporter. But the incident did land John on the FBI's radar and showed the kind of turn he was taking in his life. John had grown increasingly deluded after his split with Trias. He lived in a fantasy where he was a badass martial arts guru. He dreamed of transcending the sport and becoming an American superstar. He even bought a pet lion cub to add to his mystique. He'd walk around with it on a leash. It was legal at the time. In 1967, he legally changed his name to Count Juan Raphael Dante, despite being Irish. He now claimed to be a descendant of exiled Spanish royals that were hiding in America under fake names from anti-royal Spanish communists. It was a totally BS story. Count Dante's backstory was based on more BS stories of his own tenacity in the streets and mastery of all martial arts. According to Dante, he had spent time womanizing and training under martial arts masters in the Far East and participating in death matches in front of thousands. He had been a guerrilla fighter in the mountains of Cuba during the Cuban Revolution, and he claimed to have trained under Bruce Lee. In Morihei Ueshiba, he issued challenges to the wrestling champion, the judo champion, and on July 28, 1968, a rumor of one of these challenges made the headlines of the gossip magazine, The National Informer. Dante allegedly showed up at the Chicago home of Cassius Clay to challenge the world heavyweight boxing champ. No one was home. Count Dante was a clear shift in his image from back in his Black Belt magazine days. John, now Count Dante, was branding himself as a mysterious and violent martial arts guru. Dante changed his physical image too. He dyed his hair black, trimmed his beard, did his makeup every morning, and added a velvet cape and cane to his garb as well. To support his lifestyle, he opened a salon called House of Dante in 1967. He was terrible at it, but he still go as far as claiming to do hair for Hugh Hefner's Playboy bunnies. Another lie. Dante had published many articles and booklets in his time as an instructor, but his next publication would be his most famous. Dante had an obscene fascination with the most brutal aspects of martial arts, particularly Dim Mak. He claimed to be an expert in it, and that it was the highest form of Kung Fu. His obsession with Dim Mak birthed a fighting system he developed in the late 60s, Kata Dante, the dance of the deadly hands, or a dance of death. The system taught more of a fighting attitude than actual fighting technique. It was designed for street fighting and taught vicious attacks designed to maim, injure, or kill. Based on Kata Dante, he wrote the booklet, World's Deadliest Fighting Secrets. It was basically a fake karate manual. In it, he detailed the steps to the dance of death. By learning all of the steps, one will become an effective fighting master. He placed ads in Marvel comic books, where he built himself as the supreme grand master of the Black Dragon Fighting Society and the deadliest man alive. For $5, one could mail order World Deadliest Fighting Secrets and also receive a free Black Dragon Fighting Society membership card. To impressionable comic book readers, it was viewed with the deadly mystique as something that can incapacitate a man with a few strikes. The ads appealed to people with boring, mundane lives, or a chance at the excitement his methods offered. It was popular with bullying victims too. Inside the booklet, World's Deadliest Fighting Secrets, the first 2 pages dragged on about Dante's martial arts prowess, his strikingly handsome looks, and his devotion to classical singing. Those were followed by photos of Kian in a black silk gi, demonstrating techniques like the groin slap or grab and tear off, often called monkey stealing a peach, on Doug, the second deadliest man alive, Dwyer. Regardless, the booklet sold well, and by 1969, he had opened 3 new dojos in the city. In his personal life, Dante started dating a waitress from the Playboy Club. He turned her into a character too. The Dragon Lady was the sidekick to Count Dante, a Playboy bunny with a black belt. Though she had little karate skill in real life, they appeared together in tabloid covers and local television shows. They'd perform acts that were a combination of martial arts and magic tricks. Dante's next promotion stunt came in the summer of '67. He promoted a stunt where he claimed he'd killed a bull with a single blow. Bull killing was the signature stunt of a karate legend, Mas Aoyama, and known to draw a great crowd. Dante purchased a bull and drove it around town in a truck flatbed with signs promoting the event. But on the day of, after the seats of the Medina temple were filled, Dante bailed out. He passed the task on to a 19-year-old student of his, Arthur Rapkin. He was completely unprepared. Before Rapkin could attempt the stunt and likely fail, Dante took the stage and lied that the event had been shut down by the Chicago SPCA. All of the promotional ploys were building up to tournaments Dante would host. In August '67, he promoted one of these tournaments, and by the end, he was declared the world's deadliest fighting master by the World Federation of Fighting Arts Committee for having beaten the nation's best in cross-discipline death matches. In '68, he conveniently retired from fighting, meaning no one could challenge him for the title. In September '68, he held the first full contact tournament in the U.S. He was eager to prove the effectiveness of Kata Dante, and violence was the main selling point of the tournament. He expected a large crowd to witness the blood and broken teeth, but surprisingly, it sold poorly, probably due to the locals sensing he was a fraud after the sham that was the bull-killing event. Dante was extremely disappointed. He owed a lot of people money too, so he set up a fake robbery of the money he made to get off the hook. Dante would continue to host full contact tournaments, but never to the level of success he had experienced with Robert Trias. Other schools had issues with Dante and his tournaments, and they alienated him even more from the martial arts community. Dante grew more self-destructive as the years passed, and even started to call himself Count Dante in his own personal life. Dante and crew were known to cruise the bar scene looking for brawls, or walk into rival dojos and instigate fights. His followers were scared to check or confront him about his behavior. John Keane was slowly turning into his Count Dante character. Dojo wars were beefs between martial arts schools, often over girls, insults, money, or honor. These school beefs and brawls were common, but no one ever died. The Black Dragons built a reputation for fighting against other martial arts schools in off-the-books fights, and because of Dante's lust for violence, a fight with the Black Dragons meant there would be blood. These fights became known as Chicago's infamous Dojo Wars. Dante's proclivity for taunts and threats led to several altercations with rival gyms, smashed dojo windows, and students and instructors being jumped on the streets. The Green Dragons in Logan Square were one of the Black Dragons' biggest rivals. The Green Dragons went way back to the early 20th century, and they were known for their use of medieval weapons. Their gym itself was full of these primitive deadly weapons, giving off a dark, grim vibe. Promotions at Green Dragons were similar to gang initiations. One had to fight 8 different people till they dropped. They went on for hours. On top of that, it was private and popular with the Chicago police. In April 1970, word went around that the Green Dragons had called John a washed-up hack, something John couldn't let go. He rang up Jim Konsovich, a 6'2", 265-pound 26-year-old, and Dante's best friend. Konsovich was a judo champion and legendary brawler in the streets. Jim was Dante's protege, and the first person Dante would ever call for backup. Some say Jim Konsovich was the Count's only friend, aside from his protege Bill Aguiar. Jim called a second friend, Ken Knudsen, who declined to come. Ken dismissed the disagreement as kid stuff. Dante also rang up another friend, Michael Keloff, who agreed to come. Later that evening, Dante turned up to Jim's dojo to pick him and Michael up. He found Jim had brought 3 of his students, 3 feeble-looking teenagers with little training or fighting ability. Regardless, the crew then made for the Green Dragons gym. According to the students at the Green Dragon's gym, 6 unknown assailants entered the school with their leader. The man flashed the deputy sheriff's badge and claimed that the students of the school were all being placed under arrest. The disguised Dante then unexpectedly struck instructor Jose Gonzalez in the eye with a weapon hidden in his palm. The gym erupted in a bloody melee seconds after. The Green Dragons quickly grabbed their own weapons off the walls: samurai swords, battle axes, and maces. One of Dante's crew was struck in the back with a Chinese short axe, while one of Dante's crew struck a Green Dragon in the eye with a nunchuck. Jim took down several Green Dragons with a combination of heavy blows and judo. He kept fighting despite several blows from a mace that severed his hands. Jim struck Jerome Greenwald from behind, took him down, and started to pummel him. In a panic, Jerome grabbed a 14-inch dagger from the wall and stabbed Jim in the abdomen. Realizing the damage, Jim yelled at everyone to get out, and as they ran out, another Green Dragon Jim had decked at the start of the brawl raised a spear and chucked it at Jim. Jim yanked it out of his neck, stumbled a few feet down the sidewalk, collapsed, and died. Paramedics would find Jim with 36 slash and stab wounds, including the fatal blow to his neck. In the aftermath, Jim's 3 students ran off and called the police. The next day, Jerome Greenwald was arrested and charged with murder. Dante was allegedly found by police hiding under a desk in his back office. He was charged with aggravated battery and impersonating a police officer. The rest were all rounded up on the same day. In interrogations, Dante claimed that he and his students received death threats and that he planned to level their entire instructive force in retaliation. Count Dante approached a lawyer named Bob Cooley. He heard Bob had mob ties and he could get him off easy. This period in Chicago was very corrupt and mob-influenced. Bob Cooley was also prepared to contend that there was no way for Dante and company to anticipate the swordplay that took place that night. Despite this, at the trial in 1971, the lawyer ended up not having to do or say much. In fact, the judge found the case so ridiculous that he threw it out and dismissed all the charges. The judge notably screamed, "You're each as guilty as the other. I've never seen such a pack of lunatics." In interviews that followed the trial, Dante claimed to be a changed man and swore against challenges unless attacked first. This turned out to be a lie. He hadn't given up his eccentric Spanish guy shtick and swung on anyone who clowned him about it. Despite beating the case, Dante would still feel the consequences in real life. Jim Konsovich was beloved in the martial arts community, and the blame for his death fell on Dante. His reputation was tarnished. That meant business would dry up for his schools as well. His attempts to set up hair salons failed, even after making Count Dante branded cigarettes to boost their publicity. Soon, he was broke and needed a new hustle. Count Dante asked Bob Cooley to introduce him to his Chicago outfit connections for some earning opportunities, and in no time he was working with the mob. He spent the next few years selling nudie magazines, managing car lots, and selling peanuts at Comiskey Park, all courtesy of his Chicago outfit connections. While he slowly faded into obscurity, another unexpected opportunity came his way. Bruce Lee's death in 1973 was a big shock globally and left a void that film directors needed to fill. Enter the Dragon, released posthumously, was a box office hit and proved there was big money in kung fu movies. Count Dante, a seasoned martial artist and famous face, was allegedly considered. It's rumored that he was tapped by Council of Films to appear in a screen test and flown to Hollywood for casting consideration. According to Cara Dante's disciple Bill Aguiar, Council's attempts to capture Dante on film proved futile. Allegedly, the cameras used by the studio somehow failed to capture Dante's brutal lightning-fast hand techniques. An additional claim was also made that the company's insurance coverage was canceled after Dante's shoot. Apparently, the world's deadliest man refused to pull any of his punches and kicks for the screen test, resulting in injuries to several of the martial artists hired by the studio for his shoot. That was the end of his short-lived movie star dreams. With the movie role falling through, Dante made back for Chicago and dabbled even heavier in mob activity. Depressed from the loss of his close friend Jim, he struggled with the booze and pills addiction as well. In 1974, he allegedly was one of the masterminds behind the Pure Leather truck heist that got away with $4.3 million, $26.6 million today. It was the largest cash robbery in the U.S. at the time. A quarter of it is still missing today. In the fall of that year, Dante was given a lie detector test on his role in the heist. He passed. In 1975, Count Dante would have one of his last media appearances. Seemingly despondent, he told a reporter, "I want people to forget me." 2 months later, he was found dead in his apartment, dead of a bleeding peptic ulcer. Dante died shortly before the Pure Leather heist trial was completed, and all but one person involved were convicted. Speculation would follow that Dante was killed by the mob by way of subdermal injection of cancer cells. But before any investigations could be made, his girlfriend had his body cremated. That was the end of John Keane. Sadly so, at the start of the golden age of martial arts, film releases propelled martial arts to new heights, the like which Count Dante would have been thrilled to be a part of. Count Dante was a man ahead of his time, his own worst enemy, and a story straight out of a comic book.